then we're going to zero in a bit on the Weymouth compressor station fight, which is the focus of our postcard. And we're going to talk about some best practices for mom-to-mom outreach. And I am hoping practice a conversation and debrief. We hopefully will get time to do that in a full way. And then we'll do a quick evaluation and closing after that. And again, the goals for this training is to understand the basics of the Beyond Gas campaign and our Mother's Day target, who is our lovely Governor Baker. So we'll talk about why he's our target and why we're, as mothers, we're upset with him. And then understand best practices for community outreach and door-to-door and in general. So I say that because I understand some teams are doing tabling and other tactics as well. But this is mostly focused on door-to-door, but it will work for other forms of having these conversations. And for video conferences, some best practices, if you don't know, are to mute yourself when you're not speaking and say your name and where you're from. One person speak at a time. And step up, step back, which just means if you're somebody who normally speaks a lot, try to speak a little bit less. And if you're someone who doesn't speak, try to, push yourself to speak a little bit more and share with the group. So I'm going to move to our check-in question, and that is name, where you are from, and do you have any experience door knocking or canvassing? And if so, what it was. So I will model the response to the question, and then I'll pass it to the next person who can hopefully then pass it to someone else. So I'm Amber Cano Martin. I'm in Amherst, Massachusetts. And I just want to share that my first experience canvassing was 20 years ago. And I was canvassing door to door for an environmental group, and I had to ask for money. And it was really, compared to that, what we're doing, I feel like is so much more easy, because I had a goal of $120 fundraising every night. And, some nights I would hit that and exceed it, and some nights I didn't. But when I think about door-to-door canvassing, I always ground myself in that first experience. And all experiences after, I think, have been easier. I'm going to pass it to Ellen, because that's who I see.
There. Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Well, I've done it for years and years, and it's very hard. So I always went to the people that I knew first to kind of get my socks wet and go from there. I would rather call the person first if I know them and say, may I come by and just talk to you about so-and-so. But first of all, I introduce myself, obviously, and if they know me, great. If they don't, I tell them where I live and that I'm a neighbor. And I've done all kinds of canvassing, mostly for the League of Women Voters, for local charities, usually schools. And people were very receptive. I had some people who I didn't know, they didn't answer the door, and I tried hard not to have that discourage me. I think that's about it.
That's a great tip. Can you call on the next person, please?
Janet?
Hi. So my first experiences going door to door were for political candidates, and not intended to have long discussions. Those were very quick, hit as many doors as you can. But more recently, in 2016, I actually supervised, hired, trained, and supervised a group of canvassers in Manchester, New Hampshire, to talk to residents about living wages and the importance of raising the wage level in New Hampshire, which is the minimum, unfortunately. And that, of course, I went out in the field with them a lot, and we canvassed side by side because it was my job to train them. And it was great, actually. It was great seeing the common interests across different ethnic groups and income groups who all pretty much resonated with what we wanted to do. There's a couple people on the phone. I know I'm supposed to call on someone next. Do we have Anna Goldman? Are you there?
I'm here. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, apologies. I'm doing chores while I'm on this call. But my name is Anna Goldman. I'm living in Somerville, Massachusetts. Recently joined Mothers Out Front, and I have experience canvassing for political candidates. And I can't see screens right now because I just have a phone, so I can't call the next person. But
can I be the next person? I'm also on the phone. My name is Gerda from Arlington, and I'm with Mothers Out Front, and I have had a little bit of experience canvassing. Twice in '08, and then again in '16 for Elizabeth Warren and Healy. And yes, it was all very quick, and many people weren't actually at home because it was on a Sunday morning. But I think I can, I'm planning only to do it with neighbors. Then mostly, I'd say about 50% I will probably know. And yes, I'm looking forward to it. And I will just show them the postcards and tell them what they're all about. And this is a campaign for to remind Governor Baker to please not to let that horrible Weymouth compressor station go on. And that's it.
Great.
Thank you.
I think there's one more person on the phone, 404 number, 404, 402.
Yeah, hi. This is Christina Phillipson. I live in Bedford, and I'm not on the video, so that's why you don't see my name. My experience canvassing, if you can call it that, was when we did our gas leaks campaign a couple of years ago, and we needed to knock on people's doors and ask them if we could put a sign out in front of their house saying that they have, a gas leak nearby. And that was my first real experience, and it was terrifying, but we got through it. In Bedford, we're planning on having an event on the 4th where teams of us are going to go out and knock on doors. And I think having somebody with you will probably make it easier, I'm assuming anyway.
Yes, I think it will. I don't know if you can see everybody, so I see Alicia hasn't gone, I think.
Right. My name is Alicia Russell. I live in Arlington, and I'm with Mothers Out Front as well. My experience canvassing was many years ago when I was working with trying to help elect a local politician. So that's a long time ago.
Hi, Renu. How are you? I think you're the only one who hasn't introduced yourself and answered the check-in question.
Sorry I'm late. I had trouble getting in for a minute. And I was thankful for the last minute reminder because I had forgotten and I wanted to join it. So I'm Renu Bostrick from Bedford, and experiencing door knocking. My only experience was, I think in 2016 maybe, our church climate justice group did a door knocking for environmental voter project. And yeah, that was about it. And it was interesting because, I mean, going out in a pair with someone else really made a difference, because that sense of rejection every time you go to a door and people don't want to talk to you. And it really helped us keep going, and we supported each other. And it was also interesting to, Bedford's a small town, so you end up seeing people and then knocking on someone's door and you realize, hey, this is where they live. And, getting to chat with people that you do know. It was interesting.
Great. Is that everybody? Did I miss anybody? I think that's it. So it sounds like everybody has some sort of experience canvassing, which is great, because we have something that we can build on. And That's, you know, people have the experience that it's, you know, once you get out there and do it, maybe it's not so scary. And if you have a buddy, it's even better. So we're going to get into that a little bit more as we go on. So canvassing as a tactic for mothers out front, we just want to talk a little bit about why we're canvassing now. And if you're at the national meeting, you probably heard a little bit about this already, but I'm just going to recap. So for one, it's building our resources, and, you know, all of the things that are on here on the slide, as well as our people resources. We get a lot of new people into our Mothers Out Front world and database and contacts, so that we can get them more involved in our organization. Another reason is that we are reaching beyond the choir, so to speak, because we will meet people who might never come out to a Mothers Out Front event on their own, or who might never be, you know, at a place where we're tabling, but, you know, nevertheless, they have a stake in the crisis, and, you know, they might want to get involved with us. So we're going to them instead of waiting for them to come to us. And finally, Mother's Day, a great time to do it. It's the most important day of the year for our mom-led movement, and it's a moment when we have the ears of our politicians and our decision makers, hopefully. So it's time to get Charlie Baker's attention with our postcards. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Beyond Gas campaign as a whole. As I mentioned, it's kind of the framework for what we're doing with these postcards. And one of the most important things that I want to emphasize throughout the training is that we need to change the narrative about gas. Most people, myself included, thought natural gas was natural and that it was somehow safer than, you know, oil or coal. And it took me, you know, to really have some education about that topic to understand that wasn't the case. You know, the gas companies have really done a great job of selling the public on this idea that, you know, gas is safe and it's a bridge fuel and it's natural. And studies have shown that the way people can really change their mind when they're already have an opinion about something is having a one-on-one conversation. So that's where we come in as, you know, moms who are committed to going out in our communities and going door to door and tabling, having these conversations. Someone talking to you can really make the difference about their opinion on this. So just a few facts that are helpful to use on the doors and when you're talking about gas with people who may not know. Gas heats up the planet faster than carbon does, 86 times more than carbon in the first 20 years. So most people think, you know, it's somehow not, you know, contributing to climate change. It stays in the atmosphere less time, but it heats the atmosphere up faster. So I thought that was, you know, a really important fact, and you know, for people concerned about climate change.
Renew had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for watching that. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that in case you get questions from people, gas is actually has carbon in it also.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good point.
Make the distinction between carbon dioxide and methane gas.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that point before. That's a good point. Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll have scientists saying, oh, these moms don't know what they're talking about. You know,
yes. So another thing is that gas is explosive, and we unfortunately had a tragedy in the Merrimack Valley last year, which a lot of people were aware of, where there were explosions, and you can just see the summary here, you know, explosions and fires in 40 homes, 80 individual fires, 1 person killed, and 30,000 forced to evacuate. And unfortunately that happened, and it's present in people's minds, or it was present, so we can remind people of that, remind folks of that. Another point, I think most of us understand, you know, what fracking is, you know, how gas is extracted and how, you know, there's drilling involved, and, you know, it's a process where a lot of contamination occurs, you know, water is used, high pressure, there's a lot of byproducts. So the areas where fracking is done is very harmful to the environment there and to the human health of people who live there. So the fracked gas is coming from other states that are not Massachusetts, but it's coming into our state. So, you know, people should be aware that that process is really damaging and dangerous. And finally, 75% of our electricity in Massachusetts is produced by gas. And so we do want to, of course, transition to renewables, but we have to transition off of gas for that to happen because we're very dependent on it. So, you know, a lot of people in Massachusetts might think that we've made great strides because we don't depend on coal and oil, which is true because we were in a multi-state compact to reduce the use of oil and coal and fossil fuels over time, but that didn't include natural gas. So we have a lot of dependence on gas in Massachusetts. So our strategy as Mothers Out Front on the issue of gas, I'm going to talk about the regional strategy first, and then I'll talk more about Massachusetts strategy. So we already talked about narrative change. Across all the states that Mothers Out Front is active, on the East Coast that are working on this gas campaign, we are all united in this goal of narrative change. So we want to have one-on-one conversations. We want to use our social media, use our voices as moms to help the public understand that natural gas is not in any way safe and it's not an acceptable fuel. It's not renewable, it's not sustainable. Another piece of that is called Halt and Shift. And Halt and Shift just means that anywhere in our region where there is a new infrastructure project being proposed or built, we want to try to stop it. So Weymouth is a perfect example of that as a compressor station, which is gas infrastructure. We want to shift it to renewables where we can. So instead of just saying no to something, we want to say, you know, yes to something else, which is renewables. And then the final piece is the corporate responsibility piece. And that is also a regional strategy where we have a campaign that is working with us as Mothers Out Front called Climate Majority Project. And they are pressuring the top 20 dirty utilities to go carbon neutral by 2050. And they're using a really interesting form of shareholder activism, you know, going after the institutional investors like the Vanguards and Fidelities of the world and, you know, state treasurers and universities. And so saying, don't pull your money out of the utilities, but instead pressure those utilities as a shareholder to decarbonize. So it's an inside strategy, but it's something that we can all be a part of because we can all, you know, call these institutions to account and as citizens. So that is the third piece that's going on regionally. In Massachusetts, we've had the longstanding group task force that fights pipelines and new infrastructure. So they're the group that has been focused on the Weymouth fight for quite some time now. There's also the gas leaks and gas safety work. So they were a task force, now a working group, focusing on the existing infrastructure in Massachusetts, which is extremely leaky, as they found out. So, you know, those leaks are hazardous for, you know, both the environment and for human health. So they have been focused on that for quite some time. And that's the group that obviously did the leak tagging that some of you folks were involved in. And then we also have our corporate responsibility piece in Massachusetts where, for example, recently they went after Massachusetts Treasurer Deb Goldberg, asking her to sign on to this utility net zero campaign with the pension funds that she's in charge of for the state. So they have some work going on locally in Massachusetts as well. And
Alicia has her hand up.
Thank you for monitoring. Go ahead, Alicia.
Thank you. In terms of the shifting, so I understand that we're fighting the pipeline and the new infrastructure. Is there also an idea for shifting going on to the people who are trying to build the pipeline? Because often, you know, they just dig their heels in because there isn't an alternative financial gain. So I'm just curious. I don't know if you're going to get to that or if that makes sense. That question makes sense. So thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, what the next piece what I was just going to talk about is there is the state legislation that, and the gas leaks work group was really instrumental in crafting this legislation to promote a shift from gas to thermal heating. So we hope that this legislation goes through, and we're fighting for it as Mothers Out Front because it actually details a plan for these utilities to transition from gas to thermal heating in a way that, you know, allows them to survive as a business, which they should like. So there's that. And I think, you know, if you look regionally, the other places where they're doing halt and shift, I think the proposal for renewables vary in different places depending on what the campaign is. Like I know in Holyoke where I am, they had, you know, Mount Tom was like a coal plant or something, and they turned it into a solar farm. So, you know, I think it just kind of depends on the demands of the local people and what's feasible.
I'll just jump in for a second. I'm the organizing manager in Massachusetts, and I work with our legislation committee. And with that hat on, I have learned about and started to participate in an emerging effort across many organizations that may result in a much broader type of strategy around job creation and economic justice tied to renewables and tied to climate justice. Think of federally the Green New Deal. This could be a state counterpart, but it hasn't evolved yet. So there's nothing in front of you at the moment. But I kind of keeping my hand in that because of the reasons that you mentioned, Alicia. We really want to have jobs and not let this turn into a jobs versus the environment thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. So these, I mean, the first three bullet points under Massachusetts are groups that, you know, have worked for a long time as task forces, and just recently are coming together on the Beyond Gas campaign. It's got its own campaign team that we're going to be starting on Monday, actually. So these groups have been working really hard on their different pieces of the work over time. And this is a moment in the campaign where we're really just coming together and saying, you know, we are the unified Beyond Gas campaign for Mothers Out Front in Massachusetts. So it's a really exciting moment, and there's so many ways that the work complements each other and overlaps. So that's kind of where we're at with our campaign. Okay, so I'm gonna go a little bit into the Weymouth Compressor Station as, you know, in the framework of our campaign to, you know, the regional strategy of halt and shift and our pipelines task force in Massachusetts. The Weymouth Compressor Station is really the final link. We're gonna look at a map in a second for this northern pipeline route, which is the way of getting the gas from the Marcellus Shale, which is in, you know, Pennsylvania, New York, and, you know, it kind of over several states to get it to Canada and ultimately abroad. And I think one thing we really want to hit on when we talk to people at the doors, why should I care about this, right? It's not in my community necessarily. However, this gas is going to be basically piped through Massachusetts to be sold for export. You know, it's going to be overseas. It's going to be corporations profiting off of it. It's not even necessarily for Massachusetts. Some of it is, but a lot of it is not. So the phrase came up, Massachusetts should not be an underground highway for gas. We heard that at the national meeting, and I think, you know, seems to resonate with some people. This compressor station is really a linchpin in that plan. They need to get it through Massachusetts, and they, you know, if this is going to be successful for those companies. Weymouth compressor is hazardous to the health and safety of Fore River Basin residents, pollutes the air, it could explode. I mean, there's, as we say on the postcard, 3,100 children in close range of that compressor station if it's built. Impacts residents of Greater Boston and South Shore. Also taking into account health and safety of the residents of the Appalachian Basin as they drill more wells. So the site of the fracking and the extraction of the gas is something we can think about. And also there is an indigenous tribe in Nova Scotia whose river is being polluted. As we look at the map, you'll see where it is. So they've been active in as well in protesting that. So this is the map, and you can see this is like the Spectra Energy pipelines, and there's more pipelines. I think someone at the last training had a question, are these the only pipelines? And They're not, there's a lot more, but these are the Spectra ones, and you can see you know, where they're trying to go with this. And if you look right in the middle, right around where we are, Boston, where the compressor station will be, that's kind of like the final link that they need to then get the gas up where you see the orange up to Canada and up to those ports and ultimately abroad. I think I missed, did I miss one? I did, okay. So what is the fight back against this? Has been very strong leadership on the ground from FRAX, the Four River Residents Against the Compressor Station. That's our allied community organization. They've been fighting this for 4 years. Their key strategy has been taking on the legal battles around permitting to stop. There's a series of permits that have to be, that they need in order to build. So they've been trying to stop that. They have a lot of allies in their fight, including Mothers Out Front, lots of other organizations, and they've been fighting every front that they possibly can on every front. So why are we targeting Baker? On the left, you will see a copy of the power map that one of our allied organizations made for us, Little Sis. They did a lot of research about his financial and otherwise ties to those who want to build this compressor station. But I mean, basically, Baker is the decision maker because of the fact that he appoints people to the agencies that are granting these permits for the compressor station to be built. So we have, you know, FRAX, Mothers Out Front, and allies have really focused on Baker. We had a big action, which you guys might have been at, on February 7th at the State House, highlighting Baker's ties to the fossil fuel industry. We're kind of now pivoting for Mother's Day to a message about, you know, Governor Baker throwing children's health under the bus. That message still needs some tweaking. So, you know, you'll see as Mother's Day comes closer, you'll be getting more communications about what our exact messaging will be for Mother's Day week. But basically, he is a popular governor. He has great approval ratings, and we have a lot of, you know, reason to believe and intelligence about him not wanting to be seen as harming children's health. You know, so that's something that we want to highlight as a message, that this compressor station will harm children's health, and our doctor allies are ready to support us. You know, they have in the past and they will again, to say that this is, you know, this compressor station would harm children's health. The timeline for the final permits is June 30th. So we really are under a time crunch. All our intelligence says that they want to get their ducks in a row and have these permits ready to go for June 30th, and then, you know, ultimately start construction. So this is a really crucial time for us in this fight. This is the postcard. Has everyone seen the postcard?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yep. Isn't it? It so makes me smile every time. So that's the front of the postcard, and the back looks like this. So this is our message to Governor Baker. You can see the 3 bullet points. We want him to deny all the permits for the dirty and dangerous gas compressor station. We are emphasizing the 3,100 children that live or go to school within a mile of the site. Declare a moratorium on new fossil fuel infrastructure. And then finally, stop accepting donations from the fossil fuel industry and its lobbyists. And we have, you know, plenty of research to back that up, that he has been doing that, at least $100,000 that we know of. And then there's other sneaky ways that they can donate through PACs and so forth. So, you know, that's the final piece of our demand. That's our space down here for name, address, etc. And this is really important for us, for our movement building at Mothers Out Front, that when you talk to people, if possible, they fill this entire thing out, because that's how we will stay in touch with them. And, you know, they become part of our data universe and supporter universe. So, you know, we understand that some people just don't want to give their email or phone, but I think We always start with positive intent and ask for all of that information and trust that if people really don't want to give it, they're just not going to put it down. But, please be, as positive as possible about asking people to fill that part out because, they care about this issue, right? And if they care about this issue, then they, it behooves them to stay in touch with us and have updates and, stay involved. So,
Amber,
yes.
could I just jump in? Because I got a question by email yesterday that I want to address.
Yes.
Some people didn't realize that the lines, the lines at the bottom of the postcard, you don't have to write your name on the line because there's no room. You write it underneath the line, which I thought was clear, but apparently caused some confusion in one team. So there's plenty of space if you just don't try to write on top of the line.
Yeah, and I think on the right-hand side, some people have been writing individual messages, which I think is fine because I think what we're looking at is an in-person delivery of the postcard. So don't worry about having to write the address there.
And I just want to note that Mary Hutton is now on video. I don't know if she was on the call before, but she's joined.
No.
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Hi, Mary. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
I'm feeling very frazzled at the moment, but I'm Mary Hutton. I'm from Lexington. I'm one of the co-coordinators.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
We're just going over what's actually on the postcard. I don't know if you've seen the postcard yet, but
yes, I have. I got mine.
Oh, good.
I got 100.
I'm recording the call. So Mary, you will be able to pick up the rest of it from the recording, which we should have in about 24 hours. We should have a link that we can send out to everybody.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the postcard. I'm going to move us on. So I think I'm going to skip this piece because I want to make sure we get to our role plays. And I'm just going to go directly to some do's and don'ts that we've found at Mothers Out Front over time when outreaching to moms and talking about climate change. One of them, I'll just put them all up here. So sharing our story, that's key to Mothers Out Front culture. Telling your own story about why you're concerned, how you got involved, if you want to talk about that, and the values that we share that you can see up here, family, security, etc. Talk about our hopes for our family and children's future. And that's a way to try to keep the politics out of the conversation and relate across difference. We have listening, especially to fears and concerns. Sometimes if you've had a canvassing training before, you might hear that you should listen 80% of the time and talk 20. Not all of us reach that ideal, but the idea is to get the other person talking and listen to them about what their concerns are. And then ask questions about impacts. So, different impacts of climate change, for example, could be children having asthma, flooding that could damage our property, heating bills, whatever it is, try to ask them, what they're specifically concerned about. Then make an ask or an invitation. So at the end of every conversation, there's always what we call the ask. So we will ask them certainly to sign the postcard. And also, if you have an event in your area that you can invite them to, by all means, ask them to come to your next event, next meeting, film screening, whatever you have going on. And then completely fill out the postcard. We talked about that. Some people who don't, if people don't want to give that information, they just won't, but we should ask everybody. And then some don'ts that we've found over time. Don't assume that you know who will or won't be supportive. You just never know who might be interested in joining the mom movement. So even if they don't look like your typical environmentalist. Another thing is don't only share facts or science. So even though that, we may understand the science really well and it moves us, not everybody is moved by that. Some people are moved more by hearing about, what's important to you and just, what your values are and how that moves us to act. So telling our stories, in other words. The next one is don't debate or argue. So if you happen to find a climate denier at the door, don't waste your time talking to the climate denier. You can just move on to the next person, because all the time that we spend arguing with climate deniers is time that we lose talking to people who might want to get involved in our movement. So we want to move on to the next person. And as somebody wisely said as we were doing our check-in, don't let the no's get you down. There's always going to be people who are not interested, don't have time, etc. You may even get a door slam. I not necessarily, but it could happen. So don't let it get you down and just keep moving on to the next person. And if you have a buddy, you can have a laugh over it, hopefully. So for those who were not at the national meeting, I'm going to do the clip of the actual door knock. It's only a few minutes. That was done by Ania and I think a woman named Susan. So if you can't hear it, like just signal me, because I'm going to have to go into Facebook to play this. So I can hear it, but if you can't hear it, let me know. Just going to take a minute.
Hi, I'm Susan. What's your name? Yeah, nice to meet you. So I'm a mom. I'm joining a group called Untitled Chapter, and we're concerned about our kids. Yeah, I have 3 stepdaughters, a son, and 2 granddaughters. And how old are your kids? Yes. So I know young adults are worried about them, right? They're so worried about their son, getting a job, and making a great meal. Well, as a mom who lives in San Francisco, and what I'm doing right now is I'm concerned about the Coyote Valley. So the city council is deciding whether to use, how much money to use from the Measure T that we voted on last fall. It passed overwhelmingly, so they have this money, $50 million that we can use to save we want them to whole thing. So you want to think about Coyote Valley? Well, so as you know, came downtown, 2 years ago we had this horrible flood, and a lot of people were displaced from their homes, and my son lost his car. But so we're trying to Coyote Valley is Coyote Creek goes right through there, and if they start taking over, they're slating it for possible industrial development.
Are folks not able to hear?
No, it's not good. It's not easy to hear.
It's not easy to hear. Okay.
I can just, it's kind of broken up.
Okay. All right, let me get out of this. Hold on. And go back to my presentation. So folks who were at the national meeting were able to see this live. And for those who are not, who have not seen it, I'm sorry that we're not able to do a full role play for you.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it on the Mothers Out Front website that maybe we could, the Facebook page, maybe we could just go look at it ourselves?
You can certainly look at it. Hold on. If I go back and I give you the link, everybody can go to it on their own, if that would be helpful. Okay. I'm just going to throw that link in the chat.
And I think we're able to distribute these slides later too, right? So the slides will always have a link in it, right?
Yeah, the slides will always have a link. That's right. I think I can get the link this way.
I believe someone set up a page on our website with a few Mother's Day resources. Not everything, but a few, and this may be there too. But you have to go under resources on the national website and scroll down and see if you can identify it. It doesn't pop up easily.
Okay. I'll try it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get you guys the link. Hold on.
Let me just see if it's on the website so you don't have to take any more time with that, Amber.
And that would be
Yeah.
the national website, right?
Yes, the national website. I'm going to look right now.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm gonna move on just in the interest of time. But we'll get that link out to you guys. Okay, so the structure of the conversation, since we didn't see the video, we'll have to skip that piece, but so the basic structure that they were trying to demonstrate at the national meeting of any sort of conversation at the doors or when you're doing outreach would first just be your introduction, telling your story, your name, if you're from that same neighborhood or town, letting them know that you're with Mothers Out Front, talking a little bit about why you're concerned, about the issue of climate change. And then getting to the issue of the person at the door. So finding out, asking some open-ended questions. I just gave a couple examples here, but you can fill in the blank of your own open-ended question. Open-ended questions just mean they can't be answered by yes or no. It means they would have to go a little bit more in depth to give you an answer. So, what have they heard about climate change? What are your concerns about it? You can say, if you want to be more specific, what have you heard about gas? Are you concerned about it? What are your concerns about it? Just to try to get them talking a little bit and see where they're at. That'll give you some kind of know where you're going to go next in the conversation, depending where they're at and what they already know. One thing that is really nice to do after you've heard what people's concerns are and what they're worried about, letting them know that change is possible if we come together. So you can mention a Mothers Out Front victory that you know of or were part of. And that is a really concrete way to show people that coming together and uniting, we can make a difference. And then this is where we get to the point of making the ask. So we talked about how the conversation will always end with an ask. And in this case, we're asking them to sign the postcard to the governor. And of course, we want them to get more involved. So if you see somebody that's not only wants to sign your postcard, but is really excited and passionate about this issue, we have the postcard to get their information. You might want to make a note of their name so that we can follow up with them, let them know when the next event is. It's a huge opportunity as we're meeting new people at the doors. So that's the basic structure of the conversation. And you can, put your own spin on it. Some people don't do it in that exact order. Some people hit all of those points, but they don't, you don't have to follow that specific order if you don't want to. But those are things that you should do at some point in the conversation.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How much time should we spend with each person approximately?
That is a really good question. I think that people in the group who have experience canvassing, especially if it was political, you're told to have short and sweet conversations, 5 to 10 minutes and get out of there. But I think for this, you could definitely have a little bit longer conversation if you think you have someone who might want to get involved in Mothers Out Front. You can make it a little bit longer. But if you think it's just someone who's just going to sign the postcard and, that's it, then you don't have to stay that much longer with them. But,
Okay.
You might get a new volunteer, so you might want to, talk a little bit longer with them.
Okay, sure.
The biggest trap is the person that disagrees with you and wants to take your time.
Yes.
And it's so, for me, like I really am interested in how people think. So I get pulled in. It's very hard for me to pull myself away, but I know I have to.
That's right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
This is Renu. I was wondering, should we, is our goal to talk to people that we have no idea about their background, or like in, different neighborhoods, we kind of have a sense of who might be a supporter but isn't yet involved versus who might not be a supporter and who isn't yet involved? Should we try to focus on one versus the other, or prioritize?
I don't know. Janet, do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, we in Massachusetts are approaching this as an opportunity for teams to move people up the ladder of engagement. And I think Bedford can decide on its own if you want to go into a neighborhood where you don't know anyone and hope that you're moving people into that first rung, that supporter rung. That's obviously a great accomplishment. If you think you can move people more deeply into your work by focusing in another part of town or near a church where you know a lot of people, something like that, that's fine too. I would ask that you try to keep records so that you know at the end how successful you were.
Okay. That sounds good. So I'm just going to recap really quickly the wrap on gas, and I refer to it as a wrap. I don't know if people who have canvassed before have heard the term wrap, but it's just kind of like your 1-minute pitch about what you're doing and why. So it becomes a wrap just because you say it so many times. These are just like really, a few key points that we want to make. If nothing else, natural gas is not safe or natural. Massachusetts relies on natural gas for a huge percentage of our electricity needs, so it's a big issue for Massachusetts. And building the Weymouth compressor station is going to lock us into reliance on gas for decades to come, and will make Massachusetts a hub for exporting cheap gas. Well, not a hub, but a super highway, as somebody said before, an underground highway to get the gas to export for profit, to export abroad. So these are things that, you don't have to go like really, really in depth with people, but it's good to like have them understand at least those 3 things at the doors on gas.
Question.
Yes.
So I think one concern, like I've heard from multiple people, is, if we're relying on it, how can we switch without having the alternative yet? And so that second bullet, what should we say to counter?
Part of our plan is the legislative piece, having the future bill in place. And so I think I would mention that, we would encourage them to, look into that legislation and support that legislation. And, they can call their state rep or senator about that, because I think that's really that's kind of our answer to that question. That's a lot of people spent a lot of time drafting that bill. And Janet, you can pipe in here, but I feel like we don't just want to say hey, individual families, buy this new geothermal heating system yourself and pay for it yourself. We want it done on a more to scale, on a systemic level. So
the other thing I say, aside from that specific legislation, what I've learned is that the development of renewables has been moving very rapidly in New England. The technology is advancing, the potential for storage, which is a big issue, storing solar power so that we have it on cloudy days. All of those things are advancing rapidly and creating lots of jobs. And so that's a talking point you can use. And then what happens, what our concern is that if we lock in this infrastructure for gas, we in a sense remove the incentive for the speedy development of renewables. These things have to go hand in hand, and so it's we don't want to lock into a gas future, because then all that energy and brain power might not be focused as much on the renewables, because they need a market, not just on the thermal energy front, which is part of the future bill, but on the solar and on the other pieces. So they need a market. And what I've been learning from people that know more than I do is that state policy creates the market.
Some of us are back. Does anybody want to share how that experience went for them?
I want to partner with Ellen if I go canvassing. She's terrific.
Great.
She's really, she's very good.
And Christina was excellent too.
For those of you who were on telephone only, did the technology work for you?
It was.
Yeah, it worked great. Yeah.
I think everyone's back, right, Janet? Yeah, we're all back. Okay. Does anybody else want to give a quick share how that experience went for them?
Excuse me.
Anything you learned, anything you appreciated about what your conversation buddy did?
Yes, I learned a little bit new things, like if somebody would ask, for example, since we're saying 75% right now of the supplied energy is coming from gas, and if they would ask, what about the other 25%? So I learned that partly from coal and from oil and fossil fuels, and a small portion from renewable energy.
That's right. Okay, so I'm going to, oh, go ahead. Please finish, whoever was talking.
No, I was just going to say that when you introduce yourself and say that you're with Mothers Out Front and the mission is to provide a future livable climate for children and grandchildren, people might think that's, they might, maybe they won't say, but they might think that's a little general. So we need to get right away into the specifics of gas and how we're trying to bring in more renewable energy and things like that.
That's great. So I'm just going to be conscious of everyone's time. It's 11:13, and I am going to invite everyone to respond to one of these three questions since we're so short on time. In terms of the training, what worked for you? What's one key thing that you learned? Or you can answer the question, what else do you feel you need to be ready to do door-to-door outreach next week? So those are our three questions, and I would invite folks to respond popcorn style. So go for it.
Printable materials.
You would like printable materials?
Yes, that we can, leave with people, or if they have questions, or maybe even a map of where the gas is,
Do you want me to say what's coming, Amber?
Yeah, why don't you say what's coming?
I'm working on something that would be for all teams with sort of like questions and answers for you, hopefully to have in your hands on Monday. I know that wasn't soon enough for some, but, and then about the map, we weren't going to give you a ton of handouts, but tell me what you're interested in, and maybe like in rare cases, you'd have enough for those few conversations where you really need it. Tell the map of, you're talking about the map that Amber used in this presentation?
Yeah, like some of the questions that, like some of the background that you gave us just today so that we can talk to people, because we might mention a few of those things, but if we can leave, one pager with, maybe one side has frequently asked questions and the other side has like background information about with the map of the gas, and it's for export and it harms our children's future and methane is worse than carbon dioxide and stuff like that.
Okay.
That we can leave with them so that they can read it afterwards and get involved, mothersoutfront.org or something.
Yeah. So whatever I send, I'll be sending to team coordinators or people on this call, or if you've designated someone on your team as the lead for this project, all those people will get an email by Monday or Tuesday at the latest. The printing out of materials will have to happen on your end, so you'll have to make some decisions about how many things to copy. We are sending you baseball hats with Mothers Out Front logo on it for the people who are going door to door.
Yes. Oh. I have a question too. Will there be a good link to go to where a lot of this material is just captured?
Well, right now there's a place on the website with information on the compressor station. So we can send people there. Whether that's good might depend on each person's view of what's most important to highlight. So we're running fast to try to get good materials in your hands, but we may be giving you something that's a tad outdated or it doesn't have everything. One thing I forgot to say a moment ago is when you leave, if you decide to leave something with people, you're getting something generic, but I would recommend you write in a local name and local contact information so that, yes, people can come to the website and get facts, but you want them to come to your team and get involved. So write on the bottom of any handout a person's name and contact.
You could leave a spot.
Thank you.
If you could leave a spot on whatever you produce for us to fill that out, that would be a reminder to canvassers.
Right.
Is there something on the website that's short that describes the Weymouth compressor station? Ah, aha.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I can share this. I was just looking. Apparently, somehow this slide got skipped. So this has another map of where the compressor station is going to go. And
This is a great slide.
That's helpful.
Yeah. We can share this presentation with you.
That would be great.
Okay.
And Janet, whatever you're producing, like, I don't know, on the one hand, having it be a PDF that we can just print without doing any extra work, but on the other hand, making it editable so we can add our local information and stuff would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are a little bit over time, so if anybody wants to stay on and continue to chat, that's fine with me, but I'm going to officially close out this training and say thank you so much for participating, and there will be more to come, more information to come, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye now.
Take care, everybody. Have a good Saturday.
Bye.